Hello, everyone, and welcome to Watts Alive. I'm Kathy Castro, your host for the show, and it's my pleasure to have with me today David Mello. David is a storyteller and artist extraordinaire. We're going to see some of his work and hear some readings. We're also going to talk a little bit about an upcoming show that he has scheduled. We're all holding our breath with COVID, but is scheduled for the Narrows in the fall. So welcome, David. So nice
Thank
to
you.
have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Kathy.
And of course, most of you know David as the fabulous children's librarian here at the Fall River Public Library. So you've got a couple of short stories that you want to share with us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them and their history and what they are? And then we'll
Yes,
talk art.
very good. Yes, this first story is one I came across quite a few years ago, and it's one of those tales that is classified as a wonder tale. The character in the story has to figure out not a poem, a puzzle, and using his wits. And by solving this puzzle, something wonderful comes about. And in this tale, which comes from Ireland, the character does indeed have to use his wits because he must save his family from starvation. And so the tale is called One Wish. And it's an interesting question to be posed because if you had one wish, what would you wish for? It's something that a lot of us all kind of wonder about. It's nice. Mostly, you hear about being offered three wishes, but one wish, only one wish. What would you do for your family in order to save them? And the character in this tale has a very ingenious way of solving the riddle. And so this is One Wish, an old tale from Ireland. Now, long ago, a man lived on a small farm in County Mayo. The man's parents lived with him as well, and because the land was so poor, he had very little money. And like every other family, they had known their share of sorrow. The old woman had lost her eyesight and had been totally blind for 10 years. And although the young couple had wished for a child of their own, in the 5 years they had been married, no child had been born to them. But despite all these hardships, the young man managed to keep the place going and to keep food on the table and to keep his family together and healthy until a blight came on the potato crop and starvation came to their door. He knew it was up to him to save the others from starvation, and he decided to go to the only place where there was still live game to be found, the landlord's estate. Now, the landlord, he was a hard one. He often said that anyone caught poaching on his land would be hung. The young man knew he was taking a large risk, but he had no choice. He took an old hatchet, the only weapon he had in his bin in the back of his house, and he crept over the wall and into the landlord's property to hunt for game. He roamed all day searching for something to kill, and as evening fell, he cornered a beautiful white deer, more beautiful than any deer he had ever seen before. As he lifted the hatch to strike it down, the deer spoke. The deer said, spare me, and I will grant you one wish." The young man nearly collapsed on the spot with fright. A talking deer, a wish, what kind of nonsense is this? But the deer continued. "Listen," it said, "if you kill me, you'll be hung for sure. But if you consider taking my wish, you could save your family from starvation. Think about it. Come back tomorrow. I'll be here, and I'll honor whatever decision you make." The young man could not believe what he had heard. He thought hunger was starting to affect him, actually. He walked home, and the first person he met was his father. He told him about the deer and the chance of a wish, and the old man said immediately, "Wish for gold, my son, because if you have gold, you can solve any problem." The young man loved and respected his father, but he thought he should ask his mother for her opinion as well. And he walked on over to her. She was sitting there on the porch as he approached the house, and she listened to this tale, and she immediately said, "My son, wish for my eyesight to be returned to me. For 10 years I have been blind. Certainly nothing is more precious than my sight." He loved his mother, and he thought over the answer well. And then he thought that he should ask his wife what she thought. And she listened to his tale as well, and she immediately said, "Husband, for the past 5 years we've tried to have a child of our own, but we have had no success. Please wish for a child. Certainly that is the greatest wish of all." And the poor young man, he didn't know what to do. And that night he tossed and he turned all night long, trying to think of what wish he should make that following day. And early next morning, he went to the estate. And there was the white deer, exactly where it had been the day before. "Well," said the deer, "are you going to kill me, or are you going to accept that one wish?" And the man, he took a deep breath, and he said, "I shall take the wish." And then taking another deep breath, that man looked at the deer, and he said slowly, I wish my mother could see my wife rocking our child in a cradle made of gold." And his one wish was granted, and the family lived together for many happy years to come. And that is the one wish, an old tale from Ireland.
All right, great story, David. What
Oh,
a nice moral, you know.
It is, and it's a wonderful story to do with like a mixed audience, young children, older listeners, because it gets people to thinking. What is most important to them? What would their one wish be if they were put in such a situation? And so in the story, the man's cleverness and his wish to do the right thing came through.
Yeah, it did, and it did, and thank heavens for the deer that
Yes.
gave him the information, the magic deer.
Yeah, we should all be fortunate enough to come into contact with a magic deer, no?
I know it. So now you've got another one for us, and this comes out of, is it African? An African folk
This is
tale?
a West African tale.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful tale because it talks about learning from your mistakes. And it talks about the importance of patience, and that everyone, no matter who they are, they have a worth to them that should be appreciated, and how we can just overlook the talents of people. And
Exactly.
I the story. And it's
sometimes if we judge only, the book and its cover, again.
Exactly. And that is basically the moral behind this tale. And it is a tale from West Africa. It is called The Blind Man and the Hunter. Now, once there was a blind man who lived with his sister in a hut near the forest. Now, this blind man was very clever. Even though his eyes saw nothing, he seemed to know more about the world than people whose eyes were sharp. He would sit out his hut all day long and talk to passerby. If there was something they wished to know, something that they needed an answer to, he would give them that answer, and his answers were always the right ones. People would shake their heads in amazement, actually. "Blind man," they would say, "how is it that you are so wise?" And the man would just smile, and he would say, "Because I see with my ears." Well, the blind man's sister fell in love with a hunter, and they were married. And when the wedding feast was finished, the hunter came to live with his new wife in their hut. But the hunter had no time at all for her brother, the blind man. "What use," he would say, "is a man with no eyes?" Every day the hunter would go into the forest with his traps and with his spears and with his arrows. And every evening when the hunter later returned to the village, the blind man would say, "Please, please, tomorrow when you go hunting, would you please take me with you?" But the hunter would shake his head. What use is there for a man who is blind? One evening, the hunter returned from his hunt in a good mood. He had returned home with a fat gazelle. His wife had cooked the meat, and they had had a fine dinner together. And after eating, the hunter turned to the blind man. He said, Tomorrow, I think I will take you with me." And so he did. So the next morning, they set off into the forest, the hunter with his traps and spears, leading the blind man by the hand. Suddenly, the blind man stopped. "Shh," he said. "There, over there is a lion," said the blind man. "But it is all right. You see, he is sleeping. Walk carefully, and he won't hurt us." And they went along the path, and there, sure enough, under a tree, there was a lion who was fast asleep. The hunter asked, "How did you know he was there?" And the blind man just replied, "Because I see with my ears." They walked on a little further, and they were just about to step over a log that had fallen over the path. And the blind man stopped the hunter. "Stop," he said. "On the other side of that log there is a snake, coiled and ready to strike." And so they went along the side of the log. And when they got to the other side, indeed, there was a snake there. "How did you know that?" said the hunter. And the blind man just looked at the hunter and said, "Because I see with my ears." They continued deep into the forest until they came to a clearing, and the hunter set one of the traps and showed with his hands over the blind man's hands how to set his trap. The hunter said, "We'll come back tomorrow, and we'll see if our traps have caught anything." And the next morning they walked into the forest together, where the traps had been, and the hunter saw straight away that there was a bird caught in each trap. And he saw that the bird caught in his trap was a small, gray bird. But the bird caught in the blind man's trap was a beauty with feathers of green and crimson and gold. "We've each caught a bird," he said. "I'll fetch them out of the traps." And what did he do? He gave the blind man the plain, small, gray bird, and he kept the beautiful bird with the feathers of crimson, green, and gold for himself. Well, as they walked home, the hunter turned to the blind man and he said, "If you are so clever, blind man, tell me, why is it that there is so much anger in the world?" And the blind man answered, "Because the world is filled with so many people like you who take what does not belong to them." And then the hunter was filled with shame. And he took the small bird from the blind man's hand, and he gave him the beautiful bird, the one with the feathers of crimson, green, and gold. And as they walked on a bit further, the hunter said, "If you are so clever then, answer me this. Why is there so much love and kindness in the world?" And the blind man answered, "Because the world is full of so many people like you who learn from their mistakes." And from that day on, if the hunter heard anyone ask, "Blind man, how is it that you are so wise? He would put his hand around the blind man's shoulders and say, because he sees with his ears and he hears with his heart. And that's a tale of an old tale of patience and forgiving and understanding from West Africa.
Beautiful. David, do you have any idea of the years that those two pieces might have been written? How
The,
long ago?
The one from the One Wish is from about the 1700s.
Yeah.
The one from the West African tale, there's really no idea. These are especially stories from Africa. These old folk tales, they go back generation upon generation. It's hard to really say what the time of origin is.
I think it's so interesting, you know, when we can and when we know.
Right.
Like I know the next
And many of
piece.
these stories, especially like these old African tales, they were tales that were passed down through the oral tradition before there was even a time of writing them down and recording. So a lot of these tales are very, very old.
The next piece I know that you have is a piece that we both love. It's a poem, Abu Ben
Yes,
Adam.
indeed.
And I was saying, you know, before we started the show, that it probably, in its day, the original name of this character was probably Abu Ben Adim.
That's right.
And we know so much more now about the Middle East, places like Iraq and Iran, of course, Persia, from which they came, and the ancient tales. I sometimes use them in my classes. And I always point out the dates because many times, of course, they're BC, before Christ. That's how far back in time. And this, I think, comes out of the Sufi tradition.
That's
and
correct.
we do know a little bit about the Sufi tradition through our troops and so forth now that are serving in that part of the world.
That's correct. Yes.
So
And
do you want?
And Lee Hunt, he spent some time in his day in that region, and he immersed himself in the culture as well. And I'm sure the culture was greatly influenced this particular poem, written in 1836. And Lee Hunt himself was a wonderful poet and one of the leading exponents of the Romantic period, as you might remember. So.
And again, British.
British, yes.
And the British, of course, controlled a lot of that area.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Abu Ben Adam by Lee Hunt. Abu Ben Adam, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace, and saw within the moonlight in his room, making it rich like a lily in full bloom, an angel writing in a book of gold. Repeating peace made Ben Adam bold, and to the presence in the room he said, "What writest thou?" The vision raised its head, and with a look made of all sweet accord, answered, "The names of those that love the Lord." "And is mine one?" said Abu. "Nay, not so," replied the angel. Abu spoke more low, but cheerily still, and said, "I pray thee then, write me as one who loves his fellow men." The angel wrote and vanished. The next night it came again with a great awakening light, and showed the names who love of God had blessed, and lo, Ben Adam's name led all the rest. Abu Ben Adam by Lee Hunt.
And we certainly know the moral to that story.
We certainly do, yes. And it's more resonant now, perhaps, than it ever has been.
Certainly is. Yeah, I totally agree with that, David. Yes. So now you're going to have an opportunity to show us a little bit and talk a little bit about your artwork, which we're hoping will be on display, if not face to face, then virtually at the Narrows. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Very good. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito. First of all, thank you for doing your part to fight COVID every single day. One way that you can do your part even more is to make sure you wear your face cover. I wear my face cover to help my family, to help my friends, to help people I come in contact when I go to the grocery store. We're in this together. We need to help each other. We do this for each other. So that's why I wear my mask when I leave my house every day.
So welcome back, everyone, and we're going to now see another side to David's creativity and talent, and this is in the actual field of art. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how the show came to be, David, and then we'll see some of your pieces, and you can talk a little bit about them.
Well, I've exhibited my work twice before at the Narrow Center for the Arts, and my last show was a show that was featured a lot of fish, aquatic life. And one aspect of my work, which is very evident when you look at it, is I deal a lot with masks. Not the masks we're all forced to wear now,
Yeah.
but more traditional masks. And I deal a lot with faces, and the idea of pareidolia, that we can see faces in objects and in surfaces, and how different surfaces and textures can trick the mind. We're all pre-wired to just pick out faces here and there, and it's something that always kind of fascinated me. So that is also prevalent in this show that is coming up, which is going to be opening in October 11th, and it closes on December 5th. And the name of the show is Man and Beast. And as it would suggest, it's a lot of work of men and animals, some mythological, some actual animals that you might be able to identify. And these pieces are sort of fantastical in showing the relationship between man and beast. I've always been interested in artwork where there's sort of a hybrid representation between man and animal, as going back to the time of the ancient Egyptians, the Mayans, and right here in North America, the Northwest Pacific tribes, how there would always be this melding together of qualities and images of man and animal, and a lot of this kind of comes through in this show. There are ceramic pieces, some will be three-dimensional, some are masks, some are wall hangings, there are drawings, there will be paintings, so it's going to be a rich variety of images, I hope in this show. And these are some of the wall hangings. This is something brand new for me. And they're like, again, these mixtures of beast-like creatures and man-like forms. They're meant to be decorative and engaging. And here's an example of one of my animals right here. Here's
Now, David, if I could just ask, are these for sale? If anyone sees them is interested?
The majority of them are for sale. Some of them I've grown rather attached to, and they will remain with me.
With you, yep.
And a lot of the paintings have a type of allegorical appearance to them and message to them. A lot of them are very colorful and kind of mysterious in a way, which is what I like. And of course, very theatrical, which kind of relates to my other interest, theater. A lot of the images are faces with hats.
Now, what is the history, David, of, for instance, with the hats, or in this case, with a head?
In this case,
the animal being sort of made part in some way of the human.
Yeah, well, it comes simply because I like hats. Okay.
No. I'm wondering. Yeah, but there's a past to that. There's a history to that. This kind of blending of man and animal together in art and in other things.
Well, yeah, it's a history that goes way back. It's almost prehistoric in nature,
right?
Where man we've always admired animals for whatever their abilities that we lack and they have. So there's that natural combination that ancient man used to put in the art in a way to kind of grasp those abilities for themselves. So it's a kind of imagery and magic mixed together.
And the interesting thing I find too is, of course, this is long before what we're discussing now, the sort of history of this combining of long before any idea of evolution or any such thing as that. I mean, this
Mhm,
was just, it's like the word you mentioned earlier, wired in.
mhm.
And, in some of my studies in the past, for instance, they found that the storylines that keep repeating, and they all repeat, I think it's 7 to 9, are the only amount of storylines we ever have. Everything
Mhm.
comes from those, are wired in.
Yes,
So that's a very interesting study, the
it
workings of
is.
the brain. And
And a lot of these stories and a lot of these images, what is always very fascinating is that they're prevalent in cultures that that were here in North America or in Europe or on the islands, and they had no way of contacting
connecting,
each other back then.
exactly.
But
Yep,
there's that thread that exists despite the barriers that existed at the time. These
right.
storylines remain prevalent, and and in these cultures.
It's very interesting
Yeah.
study, very
Yes, it is.
interesting part of the
And
work
it
with the
and it
brain.
holds through for many of these images too. That there are
Oh, absolutely.
so many images, like in the Mayan culture, in the Egyptians, that they, as far as we know, we don't know exactly what, if they had any contact or whatever, but there was that influence that can be seen, in both cultures and in many existing cultures.
Well, we find it. I think you'll find it too with Native American life in the beginnings of in North America and in places like Mexico with the
Right.
Incas and the Aztecs. Well, the Aztecs in Mexico.
Mhm.
But is it very? I think it's just fascinating, And
Yeah,
again, going back to the fables, and how
exactly.
ancient a lot of this stuff is, really.
And you mentioning the Native Americans, the images of the Northwest Pacific Indians, Native Americans, were always very influential on me. The way they creatively melded both man and animal together, both in their stories and in their carvings and in their painting, and also in their rituals, the elaborate masks and the headpieces that they
Yeah,
would create. In a way, it was for them to immediate in a way become these creatures,
these
to
creatures. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. The blending of the two,
yeah.
the human and the animal,
Yeah,
coming together to blend
it was the
with
way
no
the
knowledge,
Native,
with no knowledge of that of having evolved from.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very interesting. I think it is.
Well, the show itself should have. I'm shooting for at least 80 pieces in the show, and I'm hoping. I'm hoping that people will be able to actually attend the event and go down there to the actual gallery to see the
I
pieces
know.
in their physical nature, but it is my understanding that there will be a virtual display that they will be making available as well for people who log in and want to see the pieces. So I encourage people to do that and go right now to their webpage. There are some other examples of my work on their website right now, and it will give a kind of flavor for what the show will be like.
For what's to come.
For what's to come, yes.
Thanks so much, David. It was
Thank
always, as
you so very
always,
much.
it was a pleasure having you on, and we'll do it again.
Pleasure's
Thanks.
mine. Take care.